knitters, it's me, Lois, with Aussie Lozzie Knit Designs. I'm coming to you today to talk about my latest blog post, which is Frog It, How to Set Reasonable Knitting Timelines. If you're anything like me, sometimes this can be a struggle, and it's not so much what I write down in the calendar, but what I think the instant I see a new knit pattern that I want to make, I'll see it and my brain just takes over and says, oh, that looks quick, that looks easy, I'm gonna get that done in no time. But the truth is, knitters, that knitting takes time. A lot of time sometimes. And so in my blog post, I'm going to go through steps to make this easy. The first thing I do is identify the real problem with the knitting timeline, which is that thought process right there that I mentioned, how we think this is going to take no time, this looks simple and easy, and we set ourselves up to have knitting mishaps, whether that be life gets in the way and we didn't get to knit as much as we wanted to. The yarn that we have is tangled and it takes hours. I've been there, hours to untangle the mess. We didn't read the instructions carefully. We skipped ahead and then found that we made a mistake and we have to frog it all. Whatever it is, the real problem is that we gave ourselves an unreasonable timeline to begin with. And so I'm going to take you through some steps on how to set a reasonable timeline. Step 1 is going to be looking at your calendar. Step 2 will be thinking about your primary objective. And then step 3 is going to be creating your knitting timeline and maybe setting checklists and actually putting something in your calendar that you can be true to and honor, instead of this crazy idea in your head that you didn't write down because it was a little lofty and you didn't think you'd be able to make it. So we just walk through those steps. All right, so we're at step 1, which is looking at our calendar, and I just kind of threw this calendar together. This is what I'm looking at the week of September 13th. And as you can see, I have a class early in the morning, I have work, I have a class in the afternoon, and I've given myself some knitting time in the evening. But that's just on Monday. On Tuesday, I don't have time for knitting. On Wednesday, I don't have time for knitting. So when we're setting our timeline, we actually do need to look at our calendar, because if I hadn't looked at my calendar, this 1 week class, guaranteed I would have forgotten about it or just blown it off as not time that I can't knit. Same with my appointments. I would have just either forgotten about it or thought, I don't need that much time, or I can knit at my appointment. Either way, it's not knitting time. And so we need to take all that into consideration. Okay, so then step 2 is identifying your primary objective for your knitting. This is really important, and I don't think that we should just always think that our primary objective is to do well on a knitted item. At least, I know that's not true for me, especially if I've been working on some huge marathon project with color work and, I don't know, like a big project, like a big blanket or a big sweater or something that's more intricate and takes a lot of time and thought. A lot of times I do what I call a victory lap knit, which is something fast, easy. I don't really care about it. I just want to put a little check mark next to that I finished this object. And so that is a huge thing that I think you should take into consideration. What is your primary objective? Are you doing a victory lap knit? Do you not care if it has some mistakes in it? Are you good with going fast? Or is this something that you're knitting for your grandma, that you want it to be perfect with not a single missed stitch? That's worth taking your time on. That's worth giving yourself more time to work on as well. So take that into consideration when you're making your timeline. All right, so step 3, when we talk about, we could use a checklist or a calendar to actually write down the different steps. And so here's a sample for me. I just published a Bobble Bobble beanie pattern. So I wrote these steps here, and I didn't gauge swatch because it was my pattern. I already did that. But you should add a gauge swatch in there. And each of these elements is going to take time. So make sure that you kind of have an idea of how long that's going to take you. Is the band 2 inches with bulky weight yarn? That's not going to be too long. Is the band 4 inches with finger weight yarn, that's going to take some time. So really take the time to think about that and create little milestones. Also be a secret cheat code that I sometimes use, and you can use too if you don't feel like doing all the steps. If you just want to give yourself a little grace, a little kindness, a little patience, please do that. And a really easy way to do that is whatever it is that you're going to knit. So my example earlier was, I'm going to knit a beanie this weekend. I think about it Friday night at midnight. I need to go get yarn. I didn't buy the pattern yet. Maybe I buy the pattern that night because I'm so excited. But there's things that have to be done, and there's life. And setting myself up to finish this knit item by this weekend was probably not the best idea, because I forgot I have a party to go to, and I forgot that the chores still need to be done, and I forgot that I don't actually knit for 8 hours a day or however long the hat takes. I mean, sometimes they're quick knits, right? But sometimes they're not. And so we really need to give ourselves some grace. And so that's why I recommend, if you do a cheat code, add a week. You want to knit that this weekend? Add a week to that. Because if you finish it this weekend, hooray, you're not going to be sad, right? You're going to be so thrilled that you beat your timeline. You turned it in before the deadline. But if you miss that deadline in your mind, you might really beat yourself up about that. Like, oh, I couldn't get it done. You know, I failed. You didn't fail. You're still making something great. You just need to give yourself a reasonable time to get it finished. So you can add a week. If it's a larger item, add more weeks. You know, I'm in the process of knitting a blanket for my niece's birthday. I've had a deadline way in advance, and knowing myself, knowing that I was gonna be designing it as I'm knitting it, I gave myself an incredible amount of time to get that done. And the end result is that it's going really well. It's not perfect because I'm still designing and picking new stitches and that kind of thing. But as far as the pressure that I put on myself, you know, the blanket is about a third of the way done, and I still have 8-9 weeks left. That feels amazing because I know I'm gonna finish that blanket. I'm gonna weave in those ends. I'm gonna block it and wrap it, and it's gonna be great. And I don't have to feel stressed, and that is the most important thing. So the last thing that I want to say is to remember with ourselves that we always need a little patience, and that goes with our knitting too. We are not, or if you are, please tell me, but I'm not a Shetland knitter, right? I don't know if you've seen them. They knit like 200 stitches per minute. Walking? What? No, that is not me. Me knitting is like sitting down with the needles, and I do sometimes clock myself. Does anyone else? Leave me a comment. Is that weird? But I'll be like, how fast can I knit today? And I'll set a timer, and I've clocked myself at about 100 stitches per minute if they're just like straight on consistent knit or purl. If there's any kind of back and forth, that number goes down, right? And so we need to take all of that into consideration. So once again, remember with yourselves and your knitting to give yourself a little patience. Thanks so much for watching, and happy knitting.